Let's just go broad with it. Danny, start.
I mean, this was a mismatch of epic proportions, and we all kind of had this feeling going in the game. This was a worry of mine, that the game could get sideways. Georgia played a game pretty close to perfection. They didn't change their identity. They dominated the line of scrimmage. They didn't give up the big play. Stetson Bennett played great. And here we are. There was a team that's at another level, and TCU has nothing to be ashamed of. Georgia would have done this to a lot of teams across college football.
Dominance. I mean, flat out dominance. And I think in back-to-back national championships, in what I feel like is the toughest area to win a national championship, and the way they did it, it just goes to show you where this program is right now for Georgia with Kirby Smart as their head coach. Yes, they're going to have some shoes to fill. They had to fill them this year with all the players that moved on in the NFL draft. But the reality is this team is now at the top of college football. They are now sitting on the throne, and it's who can catch up, who can knock them off. And then, as you said, for TCU, nothing to be ashamed of. They needed to play their best game. They obviously played nowhere close to that. But the reality is still a wonderful story for this program. And Sonny Dykes in his first year as he's still building up TCU.
You know, we saw Stetson Bennett play such a high-level game tonight. We saw Georgia as a team play such a high-level game. They were actually able to curtain call him off the field. Like, we got to see advanced spring practice in the fourth quarter of a national championship game. And, like, the three of us were talking, as has been everyone else, where do you put Stetson Bennett? Not just in the pantheon of, like, Georgia quarterbacks and players, but all time in this sport. They were flashing stats on the big board here at SoFi about how his stat profile compares to that of Joe Burrow in title games, and yet not first-team All-American. So you're looking at history being made. But Brady, I'll start with you. 10 years from now, how will we remember this guy?
I mean, to me, he should be remembered as a college football Hall of Famer. However, because he's not a first-team All-American, he doesn't fit their criteria. Now, I could go on a tirade now about how dumb that is, and that shouldn't be the case, but I'm not going to spend this moment doing that. I think he's going to go down as one of the best college football players to play, but more importantly, I think in the big moments. Like, that's when he played his best. In the college football playoff in back-to-back years. Throughout the course of the season, he did the job that he needed to do in order to get the wins and get to that point. But when the lights shine the brightest, Danny, that's when he showed out and played his best football.
College football legend, you know, for a lot of different reasons. Last year it was really, he was a legend because of his story. The walk-on, the long road, taking that path. This year he kind of elevated himself to being somebody who was legitimately one of the top quarterbacks in the entire country. And yeah, there's going to be a lot of nitpicking because he had so much talent around him, and that defense, last year maybe one of the best defenses in the history of college football. This, one of the best defenses in this year's, era of college football. But you can't take that away from him. There's only so many guys who have gone back to back, and he's been phenomenal. And he is exactly what Kirby Smart wanted him to be.
Sometimes you have to remove the next level from the conversation. Like, if you're trying to judge your place in the history of this sport, NFL has no place in the conversation. We will have time to talk about that guy, Stetson Bennett, and how he potentially projects or doesn't project. There's red and black confetti on the field for a second time in as many years, in large part because of that guy. Here's another thing. Danny, you just mentioned a few minutes ago, they lost so much to the draft. History would tell you, Brady, that this was supposed to be, at the very least, a reloading year, if not an outright rebuilding year. And I'm not saying it wasn't, because this was a different looking team at times this year. It's just that you've seen a program now reach an apex point to where even in the years where they're supposed to be reloading the chamber a little bit, if things fall right for them, this can still be the result.
No, and look, I think this is where, if you're Kirby Smart, you're tested. When you have this sort of success, everyone wants to have a piece of it. And you saw this with Nick Saban back when they were the dynasty in college football. Your staff starts getting purged away. People start pulling away your offensive coordinator, your defensive coordinator. Now with the transfer portal, you've got players being pulled off your roster who are 4-star, 5-star talents that aren't playing. Now, with the success they've had, you think those guys would want to wait in line because they know what's in store for them based on the back-to-back national championships. But, to me, I keep going back to the rest of college football right now, and where I think there's a big gap in catching up to this program and what they've been able to demonstrate and do. The only question mark for me with Georgia moving forward coming into next year is who's the quarterback. Who can fill the big shoes left behind with Stetson Bennett? Isn't Carson Beck, who we saw tonight, who got a little bit of action? That's the only question mark for me moving forward. It's hard to stay up at this level. You know, I work with a guy named Urban Meyer who talks about winning national championship, and you know, having to win it another time is, the first one's great, the next one's even tougher because now everyone's aimed at you. You become the hunted, and that's a heavy crown to wear. That crown's to be worn by another quarterback next year for Georgia, and Kirby Smart has to figure out how to condition his team for that.
I don't know how he did it, Jedi mind trick or what it was, but we heard Stetson Bennett before the game saying nobody respected us. We talked to one of their defensive tackles, and he said everybody thought we were going 6-5. I'm like, what are you talking about? You guys, like, we all thought you guys were going to be in the picture. I didn't think they would repeat, but even think they were going to go it away. But that is one of the tricks that great programs do, is find whatever it takes to motivate you so that there is no drop-off. There isn't a letdown game. And yeah, they had a little bit of a slippery, you know, like Missouri, Kent State. It was a little bit dicey. But think about what they did against Oregon. Think about what they did against Tennessee. Think about what they did in the SEC championship game. When they wanted to, when they dialed in, and tonight in the national championship game, they have another level that other teams can't go to. Now, Kirby's challenge is going to be maintaining that level of excellence. Saban was able to do it. Kirby's been able to do it for 2 years. And people are already going to start asking, when's that third one coming?
If you go back to this time last year, they celebrated championship win. Two things started to happen. Number one was just the defections to the draft. So even though they were coming back this year trying to quote-unquote repeat, so many new faces, complacency never really set in for them. The second thing is, the spring and summer, we spent talking about everything but Georgia. There was so much turmoil in the sport that the light never really got shown on them the way it normally is a national champ. And it was much to the delight of that coaching staff, obviously. But speaking of that coaching staff, the head coach now, we got to start talking. What we've been talking about Kirby Smart in rarefied air, but now you start getting into that sort of changing of the guard territory. And Brady, I know you talked before the game about how if this is the outcome, we may be there. Like, I'm a little more hesitant to cross that Rubicon, but are you there?
I'm there. I mean, and he's 47 years old, folks. Like, he's not going anywhere. I think the biggest concern for Georgia fans may be, hey, is an NFL team going to come look at him? Even though recent history with college coaches in the NFL hasn't worked out, so maybe Georgia fans got that working in their favor, but he's not going to another college program. It just comes down to if he would ever leave and want to go to the next level if that opportunity presented itself. But for me, with Kirby Smart, he's there. He's at the top of college football. He's now got 2 national championships to use in his recruitment of high school players and anyone who's in the transfer portal as a graduate transfer or looking to have an opportunity to win a national championship. So there's not much better you can do and say that. And then on top of that, he's getting guys drafted in the NFL. So it's the complete package right now.
I think you mentioned it. He's 47 years old. I don't think he goes to the NFL. He played at Georgia. He played under Nick Saban. Maybe he wants to chase Nick Saban as the greatest of all time. And I would say I kind of like his odds to do it, especially the foundation he's laid here early. What's crazy, back-to-back, we mentioned it a couple years ago, he had a chance to have 3. And they're not going anywhere. And Bama looks a little vulnerable. They did not have a great season. They have to replace Bryce Young. They have a lot of questions, too. Clemson, one of the staples, looks vulnerable. Ohio State can't get over that hump. It's been Michigan. You know, they've got the stronghold on college football right now. And who's going to take it from them is a massive question mark. So you got to give them the nod for a team that could do it again next year.
So much uncertainty in the sport, the constant, the Georgia Bulldogs, and enjoy this headline, did it with 0 players from the transfer portal, because we may very well never say that again. Brady Quinn, Danny Cannell, Josh Pate. Going to be a long night of celebration for the folks in red and black in SoFi Stadium.
Josh, Brady, Danny, thank you very much. Great work out at SoFi Stadium and great work from the Georgia Bulldogs. A 58-point win, the largest bowl win in FBS history. Not just the largest margin of victory in BCS CFP championship game history. No, the largest bowl win in FBS history. Georgia scored on 10 of its 12 drives. 9 touchdowns, 1 field goal, 1 punt. They poured it on in Los Angeles. For more,
Warren Brinson here, live at the National Championship with CBS Sports here. I'm here with
Brady Quinn,
Danny Cannell.
Danny Cannell, Brady, the Dogs just went back-to-back. How do y'all feel about this historic season? With the Dogs, people assume the Dogs are going 6-5, living in the shadow of last year. How do you feel about the Dogs and their back-to-back victory?
I think you guys are the dynasty right now. You're the king of college football. How do you feel?
I feel like this is the glory of the Dog days. The good times are forming, and the dynasty is just now beginning. Coach Smart is a great coach, and you'll be a Hall of Famer. How do you feel about the Dogs?
I think you guys took over Bama. I think you guys are the new dynasty, the new kings of college football.
You heard it here from CBS Sports. Georgia football, the kings of college football. Thank you.
That was Georgia defensive lineman Warren Brinson. He's got a future in football and broadcasting. Hey, come on over when you're done playing football. Georgia bulldozes TCU in the first half. The top dog overwhelming the ultimate underfrog. This game was over in the first half. 38-7. Georgia scored on all 6 of its drives, scored 17 points off of 3 TCU turnovers. Stetson Bennett had 4 touchdowns in the first half, 2 passing, 2 rushing. He had 2 more in the second half. And Georgia rolls. Again, they set the record for the most points in a BCS CFP title game. 65-7, the final.